On this Wednesday night, Inflation Nation. Living in Canada keeps getting more expensive.
It's taking a big bite of my paycheck.
Advice for people in debt and how to offset rising food costs. New concerns cropping up about fertilizer and food supplies.
It's not like something we can just ramp up production.
The growing frustration and pressure on farmers. The last stand in Mariupol. A Ukrainian army commander calls on the world to save civilians who may have only hours left. Plus, ways you can help bring Ukrainians to Canada. And royal relations.
It was great. It was just so nice to see her.
What Prince Harry said about the Queen that's put some noses out of joint.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We start with something you already know. The price of almost everything is on the rise, and the era of low inflation is coming to an end. Canada's inflation rate hit 6.7% in March. That's up more than 1% from February and marks the fastest year-over-year inflation jump since January 1991, which was 31 years ago. The price of gas is the biggest factor. It's up about 40% compared to this time last year. And high gas prices are accelerating the cost of everything that needs to be shipped, including food. Russia's war in Ukraine, coupled with supply chain problems, are messing with the world economy. Abigail Bimman explains what's behind rising inflation and what it means for you in our top story tonight.
I don't even want to hit the button because it's $1.84. Which is absolutely crazy. I think that's the highest I've seen it so far.
The sticker price at the pumps just keeps shocking.
I didn't see I fill up with a smile, but I have to fill it up.
For people like George Abukir,
It's crazy.
there's no way around filling up. He's a courier.
It's taking a big bite of, my paycheck.
Gas prices rose 12% in March, and year over year, a whopping 40%. Overall, inflation hit 6.7%, the biggest month-over-month increase since 1991.
We're paying more for everything, groceries, gas, durable goods.
Food prices soared 8.7% year over year, the biggest hike since 2009.
I am worried. I think my husband and I are going to have to sit down and tighten our belts.
Part of that linked to the war in Ukraine. Ukraine and Russia are big wheat producers.
The lack of Ukrainian grains on the world market has an effect on the food prices around the globe.
Pasta prices jumped 18%, cereal 12% year over year.
The best way to save right now is on the back end of the food shopping experience, which is really at home, reducing food waste. So if you buy something to eat, make sure you eat it.
To get a sense of inflation's record climb, take a look at this 5-year chart. It also shows just how much of the rise is due to gas prices. The white line is the consumer price index without gasoline.
We're realizing that we constricted supply quite a bit. And then you add into this the invasion of Ukraine.
There is really no major end in sight for this. And so prices are going to remain very high.
The CPI does not include diesel, which energy expert Dan McTague says has climbed even higher than the 40% unleaded hike, nor does it factor in the Canadian dollar.
I think the inflationary numbers are much higher than that, not to sensationalize or create some kind of scaremongering on that.
So the best advice is to not take on more debt in a higher interest rate environment.
With everyone wondering when, not if, the next interest hike will come from the Bank of Canada. Abigail Bimman, Global News, Ottawa.
Canadian grain farmers are wondering what 2022 will bring. In places on the prairies where snow has melted, it is seeding time, and the cost of fertilizer has gone through the roof. There's a global shortage made worse by Russia's war in Ukraine. Canada is the world's largest producer of potash used in fertilizer, accounting for nearly 32% of the world's total. And Russia and Belarus produce nearly 40% of the global supply, along with other key soil nutrients. Heather Yourex-West explains what that means for farmers and for the food supply.
And then in 24 hours, it's plus 11.
It's seeding time in southern Alberta, and Stephen Vandervalk is already concerned.
Prices are great, so they can't complain about that, but inputs are skyrocketing. Skyrocketing might not even be the word. It's just gone crazy to the point of we're not able to even get some product, and you can't potentially even afford to put it in the ground.
But there is pressure on these fields to perform because the war in Ukraine is now putting millions in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa at risk of having too little food. Last month at the NATO summit in Brussels, Canada's Prime Minister promised this country would be there to help.
The issue of food security, how we can ensure that at home we're planting as much as possible, and that is something that Canada can contribute to.
It's difficult to watch that, to be honest. It's coming from a government who knows very little about agriculture. First of all, farmers grow as much as we can every year. It's not like something we can just ramp up production.
Particularly as the costs of fertilizer and fuel soar.
But the challenges go beyond rising input costs. Many farms across the prairies are coming off one of the worst drought seasons in decades. And as seeding begins here in southern Alberta, the fields are very dry.
2021 was not a good year, and the reason why it matters so much this year is because we're starting the new year 2022 with really low inventories. Typically you would actually have something to sell, something to work with, but that's not the case in 2022.
It also means seeds for this year's crop are in short supply.
Unfortunately, in the federal budget a couple of weeks ago, there was really no provisions to help farmers with any inputs whatsoever.
Farmers will just have to cut back on what they do, which means they'll cut back on yield.
And in a global grain shortage, that is the opposite of what the world needs from Canada. Heather, Yourex-West, Global News, near Fort Macleod, Alberta.
A little later, some advice from a personal finance counselor about how best to deal with rising costs and interest rates. First, though, to Ukraine. A fighter holed up in Mariupol says hundreds of civilians may have only hours left to live and that Russian troops outnumber his fighters 10-1. It appears to be a last stand in the besieged city. Ukraine's president says weapons from the West are key to survival.
In order to unblock Mariupol, there are two ways. First, serious and heavy weapons that we are counting on. We don't have enough of these weapons in order to work in this direction. Second way is diplomatic. So far, Russia does not agree to this.
Canada has committed to sending heavy artillery to Ukraine, but how much and when is unclear. The Prime Minister wouldn't give any further details today. And late today, the Pentagon in the U.S. said Ukraine has not received entire fighter jets from any country, only parts for fighter jets. The spokesperson said today he was mistaken. Jackson Proskow on what Ukraine needs right now.
A small column of buses attempted to leave Mariupol as the mayor urged residents to flee the Russian onslaught. But the corridor did not work as planned, according to Ukraine's deputy prime minister. A ceasefire did not hold. Mariupol is still under siege.
The conditions there, the situation there as a result of this Russian aggression are truly horrific.
Throughout the day, smoke could be seen billowing from that sprawling steel compound in the city, the final refuge for hundreds of Ukrainian troops and civilians, reportedly including Canadians, surrounded by Russian forces. We are probably facing our last days, if not hours, said this Ukrainian commander as he appealed for rescue by a third-party country. The Kremlin shows no sign of backing down as it carries out its new offensive. In a fresh sign of defiance, Vladimir Putin oversaw a test of a new Russian intercontinental ballistic missile, which he boasted could penetrate modern missile defenses. Food for thought, he said, for those who try to threaten our country. The West remains equally undeterred. The president of the European Council visited Kyiv and promised another 1.5 billion euros in military aid after seeing the devastation.
These are atrocities. These are war crimes. It must be punished. It will be punished. They must pay for what they have done.
The U.S. said it would provide another $800 million worth of military equipment in the form of long-range artillery. The Pentagon will also soon begin training Ukrainian troops at a location in Europe.
It's meeting exactly the needs they have at this point in the war.
But help likely won't arrive soon enough to halt the Russian advances in the east. Back on the streets of Mariupol, Residents stuck behind searched for food and charged their phones, keeping critical connections to the outside world working, knowing their port city may soon be firmly in Russian control. Jackson Proskow, Global News, Washington.
The number of people fleeing Ukraine is staggering. The UN Refugee Agency estimates more than 5 million people have left the country since Russian forces invaded less than 2 months ago. That's an increase of more than 1 million refugees in just the last 3 weeks. The agency says it believes another 13 million are displaced from their homes inside the country. Canada has said it will accept an unlimited number of Ukrainians, and there's an effort now to streamline the process. It's a collaboration between 3 groups, including the federal government. Ross Lord reports.
With more than 54,000 Ukrainian refugees approved to come to Canada, there's a sharper focus on details, like how they get here. The federal government is teaming up with Air Canada to provide more flight options.
Having the benefit of this new program announced today will no doubt change the travel plans for many individuals in terms of whether they would wait for a government charter or take a commercial option.
We're going to make an aeroplan donation of 100 million points. This donation will give the flexibility of travel on the Star Alliance global network.
An American agency, the Shapiro Foundation, promises to match donations from Canadians who donate their frequent flyer points or give money to the cause. For some Ukrainians who've already arrived in Canada, though, the convoluted immigration system is presenting some wrinkles. In Nova Scotia, these Ukrainian refugees are facing $1,200 of medical screening costs, something advocates say can re-traumatize people in their time of greatest need.
The individuals that are arriving are going to be, and have begun to arrive, are lone parent families, single women, grandparents, and so with limited income.
Immigration Minister Sean Fraser suggests obstacles to healthcare and education are a work in progress.
When we've been having conversations with our provincial and territorial partners, a large focus is what can we do to have those other levels of government extend health and education services.
Provinces like Alberta say they're ready for an accelerated influx of Ukrainians.
Additional support from Alberta, we estimate of $2 million of support to provide rapid settlement support.
Based on Canada's experience welcoming other refugees over the years, advocates say it's unlikely to be a seamless transition, but it's a safe bet Canada will be a lot more secure than the lives they're leaving behind. Ross Lord, Global News.
A Saskatchewan First Nation has identified 14 possible burial sites at a former residential school. After months of work and 3 ground searches, the George Gordon First Nation, about an hour's drive north of Regina, says 14 potential graves were found close to the site of the original school. It was one of the longest-running residential schools in the country. It closed in 1996. The National Centre for Truth and Reconciliation has a record of 49 student deaths there. And the federal government is providing funding for the investigation of potential unmarked graves at the site of a former residential school in Nova Scotia. $326,000 has been earmarked for search operations on the grounds of the former Shubenacadie Indian Residential School. It was the largest in Atlantic Canada. The money could also help pay for healing programs and commemorative events or structures. Coming up, who's in the Conservative leadership race and who's likely to appeal to voters outside the party. The deadline for candidates to enter the federal Conservative leadership race has come and gone, and at least 8 people have submitted the required paperwork and the $50,000 registration fee. There's still a long way to go before the leadership vote in September, but a new Ipsos poll done exclusively for Global News shows there's already a clear frontrunner among the party faithful. Our chief political correspondent, David Aiken, reports.
In downtown Toronto Tuesday and over the last month elsewhere across Canada, Pierre Poilievre has been drawing unprecedented crowds. Visible evidence of new polling data from Ipsos, provided exclusively to Global News, that inside his party at least, Poilievre is the most popular leadership candidate. Among those polled by Ipsos who said they'll vote Conservative in the next election, 32% said they want Poilievre to be leader. Just 14% picked former Quebec Premier Jean Charest. But when Ipsos asked those who identified as Liberal voters who they thought would be best to lead the Conservatives, 40% had a positive view of Charest. Just 21% had a positive view of Poilievre.
The key takeaway for us here is that Conservative Party members have a clear choice between two different strategies.
Go with the populist favorite of the party's base, like Poilievre, or pick a leader, like Charest, who may have more potential to appeal to voters outside the party. One thing for Conservatives to consider, that moderate image that Erin O'Toole presented in last summer's election was in fact a big problem at one point for the Trudeau Liberals.
At the start of the campaign, there was a lot of potential that came from that moderate appeal.
Dan Arnold was the pollster inside the Liberal election war room in 2021, and he says there was a point in the last campaign when he was telling the Trudeau team they were on the path to lose to a moderate Conservative.
Certainly the trajectory and the way things were going was headed to a very unpleasant place from our perspective there.
And that is the campaign's divide right now. Capture the base or broaden the base. Now, as for Leslyn Lewis, Patrick Brown, and the others in the race, the Ipsos poll says the vast majority of Canadians simply do not know enough about them yet to have an opinion. Donna.
All right, David in Ottawa, thanks. Priceless advice ahead, some tips on navigating the soaring cost of living. Hearing that Canada's inflation rate in March was 6.7% is probably not a huge shock for a lot of people because, of course, people are living it. The price of almost everything is up and interest rates are rising too. Managing your money is getting trickier. With me is Pamela George. She's a personal finance counselor. Pamela, thanks for speaking with us. You know, everyone's personal circumstances are different, of course, but let's start with the broad strokes. For people carrying lots of credit and mortgage debt who got used to low interest rates and now see that is rising plus inflation, what is the first thing they should do?
Well, the first thing sounds a bit cliche, but visit your budget. And if you don't have a budget, get one going. And when you're doing that, I would say the first thing to really tackle in terms of reducing your costs to help you meet the cost of living these days, I find a good tip is to look at your subscriptions, you know, those $5.99, $10.99, Global, Disney Plus, all those, Audible, all of that. It adds up. And that is one way you can start tackling all the high cost of living that's happening right now.
Yeah, that is a good tip. Among the fastest rising costs, of course, are gas and food. Even Dollarama says it's going to start selling things that cost $5. So apart from making do with less, what other strategies can people adopt?
Well, if you have a car, as an example, like you just said, gas is going up. Gas is so high now. What about taking public transit? Leave your car at home, ditch it for a while. We're not saying it's going to be forever, but over the next few months, leave your car at home and use public transit. That's what I do, and it's working out fine for me.
What if borrowing money is the only option, though? What is the most affordable way to do that right now?
I want to go back a little bit and say, before you look at borrowing money, if you have an emergency fund, if you have some money put aside that you can easily access without it causing you a penalty, that's the first place you want to go. So to withdraw some money from that to supplement your lifestyle right now. When that is finished, then you can look at going into borrowing credit. And the first place you really want to do that is on a secured line of credit. That's usually the cheapest. After that is a regular line of credit, and then, your credit cards. What you want to stay away from is the payday loans and the high interest loans that I know it's available out there as well.
Stay away from the payday loans. Yeah.
Oh gosh, as much as you can, yes.
Yeah. I know you do credit counseling, you have clients. What are you hearing from them these days?
People are in panic right now. They are worried that they cannot support their lifestyle right now. They're concerned that their income is not enough for their current living expenses. They are panicking. Anxiety is very high in my job right now when I talk to my clients.
And what do you tell them to try to calm them?
Well, a little bit of old school. Things like meal planning. I know it's cliche again, but it really makes a big difference. Look for the sales in the supermarket. Buy in bulk if you can. One thing that my husband and I do, we usually shop every week, but once every quarter we don't. And that we save about $200 by not shopping for that 1 week. We just shop what we have in the house, use what we have, and that really adds up to about $800 a year.
Yeah.
Makes a difference.
Sure does. Those are useful tips. Pamela George, a financial counselor in Ottawa, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Love her advice. Kinship with the Queen next. What Prince Harry said about his grandmother that's raising questions. The Royal Cavalry was rehearsing in London's Hyde Park in advance of the Royal Windsor Horse Show next month, always a highlight of Queen Elizabeth's calendar. She turns 96 tomorrow, a milestone she'll mark out of the spotlight at a farmhouse on her country estate of Sandringham, a favourite spot of her late husband, Prince Philip. She has appeared more frail after he died and has cut back on some royal duties because of mobility issues. Now, news of a surprise visit from her grandson, Prince Harry, and his wife Meghan last week is making headlines. In an interview with NBC, Harry made some cryptic comments about making sure the Queen is protected.
It was just so nice to see her. You know, she's on great form. She's always got a great sense of humour with me, and I'm just making sure that she's, protected and got the right people around her.
Harry also said he feels at home living in California now. He avoided answering a question about whether he misses his brother William and father Charles, and claimed he is one of the Queen's closest confidants.
So it's her sense of humour and her ability to see the humour in so many different things. We have a really special relationship. We talk about things that she can't talk about with anybody else.
His grandmother will mark 70 years on the throne with Platinum Jubilee celebrations in early June. Harry says he's not sure if he and his family will be there because of what he calls security issues. And this new photo of the Queen was just released, taken on the grounds of Windsor Castle. She's with two of her beloved fell ponies, Buybeck Katie and Buybeck Nightingale. Beautiful shot. That is Global National for this Wednesday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is these sundogs near Winnipeg. We'd love to see your Canada. Please email it to us. And thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Bye-bye.